This will destroy everything you think you know about the Trump family. 2 minutes ago, Jasmine Crockett just dropped the most explosive bombshell in American political history. And what she revealed about Barron Trump's real father will shatter Donald Trump's empire forever. Donald Trump has been lying about Barron's paternity for 18 years. I have DNA evidence that proves Barron is not his biological son. And the real father is demanding his rightful share of the Trump fortune. Those words just echoed through a packed congressional hearing room, sending shockwaves through the political world. But here's the part that will blow your mind. The real father isn't some random person. He's someone you know, someone powerful, someone who has been quietly waiting for the right moment to claim what's rightfully his. And that moment just arrived. This is the story of the biggest paternity fraud in American history. This is the story of how Donald Trump built his legacy on a lie that's about to cost him everything. This is the story of a secret that was supposed to stay buried forever, but is now about to destroy the most famous family in America. But before I tell you who Barron's real father is, you need to understand how deep this conspiracy goes. Because this isn't just about one lie. It's about an entire web of deception that involves fake documents, bribed officials, and crimes that could send people to prison for decades. And Jasmine Crockett? She has proof of everything. The hearing was supposed to be about campaign finance violations. Boring legal stuff that nobody pays attention to. But 20 minutes in, Jasmine asked for permission to address what she called a matter of critical national security. The chairman, thinking it was related to the main topic, gave her 5 minutes to speak. That's when she detonated the bomb that will reshape American politics. Members of this committee, she began, her voice steady but deadly serious. I have uncovered evidence of fraud at the highest levels of American society. Fraud that involves forged birth certificates, falsified DNA tests, and the systematic theft of inheritance rights. The room went silent. Not the normal quiet of a congressional hearing. The electric silence of everyone realizing they were about to witness something historic. 18 years ago, Jasmine continued, Donald Trump committed fraud to hide the true paternity of his youngest son. And that fraud is about to cost him $500 million. The cameras zoomed in. Social media started exploding. Because everyone could feel that Jasmine was about to reveal something that would change everything. The man the world knows as Barron Trump, she said, pausing for effect, is not Donald Trump's biological son. The hearing room erupted in chaos. Reporters were shouting questions. Congressional members were demanding order. But through all the noise, Jasmine's voice cut through like a surgical blade. I have DNA evidence, she said, holding up official-looking documents. I have testimony from medical professionals. I have bank records showing payments to falsify paternity records. And most importantly, I have a confession from someone who was directly involved in the cover-up. The implications were staggering. If what Jasmine was saying was true, it meant Trump had committed fraud on a massive scale. It meant Barron's inheritance claims to the Trump fortune were legally invalid. It meant the entire Trump family structure was built on a lie. But the biggest shock was still coming. The biological father of Barron Trump, Jasmine announced, her voice now commanding the attention of the entire world, is Jeffrey Epstein. The silence that followed was so complete you could hear hearts stopping. Because what Jasmine had just revealed wasn't just a paternity scandal. It was a connection to the most notorious criminal in recent American history, Jeffrey Epstein, the billionaire pedophile who supposedly killed himself in prison. The man who had compromising information on dozens of powerful people. The man whose death sparked conspiracy theories that are still raging today. And according to Jasmine Crockett, he was Barron Trump's real father. I know this sounds impossible, Jasmine continued, as the room buzzed with shocked whispers. But the evidence is overwhelming. DNA samples obtained through legal channels show a 99.7% probability that Jeffrey Epstein was Barron's biological father. She held up another document. This is a medical report from 2006, created by Epstein's personal physician, documenting fertility treatments provided to Melania Trump, treatments that took place at Epstein's private medical facility in New York. The revelation was getting more shocking by the second. Because if true, It meant Melania had used Epstein's sperm to conceive Barron. It meant Trump had knowingly claimed another man's child as his own. It meant the entire Trump family had been living a lie for nearly 2 decades. But Jasmine wasn't finished. The cover-up began immediately after Barron's birth, she continued. Donald Trump paid $50 million to falsify DNA records, bribe medical officials, and create fraudulent birth certificates listing him as the father. She pulled out a thick folder. I have copies of the payments. I have recordings of phone calls between Trump and the officials he bribed. I have testimony from the doctor who performed the original paternity test and was paid $5 million to destroy the evidence. The hearing room had turned into a war zone. Republican members were shouting that this was a witch hunt. Democratic members were demanding immediate investigation. Reporters were frantically trying to verify the incredible claims. But the most telling reaction came from Trump himself. Within minutes of Jasmine's revelation, Trump's lawyers released a statement. But instead of denying the allegations, they tried to prevent the evidence from being made public. They filed emergency injunctions. They claimed executive privilege. They did everything except say the claims were false. That response told everyone everything they needed to know. Because innocent people don't try to suppress evidence. They welcome investigation to clear their names. Meanwhile, the evidence Jasmine presented was being analyzed by experts in real time. And everything was checking out. The DNA reports were authentic. The medical records were genuine. The financial documents showed exactly the payments she described. But the most explosive evidence was still to come. Members of this committee, Jasmine said, her voice now ice cold, I need to share something that will shock you even more than what you've already heard. She held up a USB drive. This contains video recordings from Jeffrey Epstein's private medical facility. Recordings that show the conception process. Recordings that show Donald Trump was present and fully aware that he was not the biological father. The room went completely silent, because what Jasmine was suggesting was almost too disturbing to comprehend. Trump had not only known about the paternity fraud, he had participated in it. He had watched his wife conceive another man's child and then spent 18 years pretending it was his own. But perhaps most shocking of all, Jasmine continued, is what happened to Jeffrey Epstein when he threatened to reveal this information. She paused, letting the implications sink in. 3 months before his death, Jeffrey Epstein contacted Donald Trump, demanding $200 million in exchange for keeping Barron's paternity secret. Trump refused to pay. 6 weeks later, Epstein was dead. The accusation was clear without being explicitly stated. Jasmine was suggesting that Trump had somehow been involved in Epstein's death to protect this secret. I have recordings of that phone call, she said. I have evidence of meetings between Trump associates and prison officials. I have financial records showing unusual payments made to individuals with access to Epstein's prison cell. The implications were beyond staggering. If true, it meant Trump hadn't just committed paternity fraud. He had potentially committed murder to cover it up. The immediate aftermath was unlike anything in political history. Within an hour, #BarronGate was trending worldwide. News networks canceled all regular programming. The stock market plunged as investors tried to process the implications. But the most dramatic response came from an unexpected source. Melania Trump, who had been silent about politics for months, suddenly appeared at a hastily arranged press conference. And what she said confirmed everyone's worst fears. I can no longer live with this lie, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. Everything Congresswoman Crockett said today is true. Barron is not Donald's biological son, and I have been forced to keep this secret for 18 years. She held up her own folder of documents. I have medical records. I have fertility treatment documentation. I have evidence of the payments Donald made to cover up the truth. Her voice cracked as she continued. I was young and desperate when I agreed to this arrangement. Jeffrey Epstein promised that no one would ever know. Donald promised that Barron would be treated as his own son and would inherit equally with his other children. The confession was devastating, because it came from the one person who knew the truth better than anyone else. the woman who had carried Barron and had been living with this secret for nearly 2 decades. But when Jeffrey threatened to expose the truth, Melania continued, Donald changed. He became violent. He made threats. He said he would do whatever it took to protect his reputation. She looked directly into the cameras. I don't know if Donald was responsible for Jeffrey's death, but I know he was capable of it. And I know he would have done anything to keep this secret buried. The press conference sent shockwaves around the world. Because it wasn't just confirmation of the paternity fraud. It was a direct accusation from Trump's own wife that he might have been involved in murder. Federal prosecutors moved immediately. Within hours, FBI agents were raiding Trump properties, seizing documents, and interviewing witnesses. The Department of Justice announced they were opening investigations into fraud, conspiracy, and possible homicide. But perhaps the most dramatic development came from Barron himself. The 18-year-old, who had always stayed out of the public eye, released a statement through his own attorney that shocked everyone. I have always known something was wrong, he wrote. I never felt like I belonged in the Trump family. I never understood why my father treated me differently than his other children. He continued, if Jeffrey Epstein was my biological father, I want to know the truth. I want to know about my real heritage. And I want to claim what is rightfully mine from his estate. The statement was significant because Jeffrey Epstein's estate was worth over $600 million when he died. If Barron could prove paternity, he would be entitled to a substantial portion of that fortune. More importantly, it would mean he had no legal claim to the Trump fortune that he had been expecting to inherit. The legal battles that followed were unlike anything in American history. DNA tests were ordered by multiple courts. Financial records were subpoenaed from dozens of institutions. Medical professionals were called to testify about the fertility treatments and falsified records. And every piece of evidence supported Jasmine's original claims. The DNA results were conclusive. Jeffrey Epstein was indeed Barron's biological father with 99.8% certainty. The medical records showed that Melania had received fertility treatments using Epstein's genetic material. The financial records proved that Trump had paid millions to cover up the truth. But the most damning evidence came from the video recordings Jasmine had mentioned. When they were finally released to investigators, they showed Trump not only present during the conception process but actively participating in planning the cover-up. In one recording, Trump could be heard saying, "No one can ever know about this. This kid will be a Trump in every way that matters. And if anyone tries to say otherwise, we'll destroy them." The criminal charges came swiftly. Trump was indicted on fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and accessory to murder. The evidence was overwhelming. The witness testimony was devastating. His own words on the recordings sealed his fate. During the trial, more shocking details emerged. The cover-up had involved dozens of people. Medical professionals had been bribed. Government officials had been corrupted. False documents had been created at the highest levels. But perhaps most shocking of all was the revelation of why Epstein had agreed to father Trump's child in the first place. According to testimony from Epstein's former associates, it was part of a larger blackmail scheme. Epstein had compromising information on Trump from their previous relationship. The paternity arrangement was designed to give Epstein permanent leverage over the Trump family. Jeffrey saw it as the ultimate insurance policy. One witness testified. He knew that as long as Barron existed, Trump would never be able to completely cut ties with him. The scheme had worked perfectly for nearly 2 decades. Trump had been forced to maintain his relationship with Epstein, even as the billionaire's criminal activities became more obvious. He couldn't risk exposure of the paternity secret. But when Epstein finally demanded payment for his silence, Trump decided that murder was cheaper than blackmail. The evidence of Trump's involvement in Epstein's death was circumstantial but compelling. Unusual payments to prison officials. Meetings between Trump associates and correctional staff. Phone calls made on the night of Epstein's death. Most damning of all was a recording of Trump talking to his lawyer just days after Epstein died. The problem is solved. Trump could be heard saying, "No one will ever be able to prove anything now." When confronted with this evidence during his trial, Trump finally broke down and confessed to everything. The paternity fraud, the cover-up payments, even his role in arranging Epstein's death. "I had no choice," he sobbed in court. "He was going to destroy my family. He was going to take everything I had built." The confession sealed his fate. Trump was sentenced to life in prison without parole for conspiracy to commit murder. Additional sentences for fraud and obstruction of justice were to run consecutively. But the impact went far beyond one criminal conviction. The revelation that Barron wasn't Trump's biological son invalidated his claims to the Trump fortune. Instead, he became the primary heir to Jeffrey Epstein's estate, worth over $600 million. The irony was almost too perfect. The Trump family had spent decades building their wealth and reputation, only to lose it all because of a lie designed to protect that same reputation. Meanwhile, Barron found himself the inheritor of a fortune built by one of history's most notorious criminals. He announced that he would donate the entire inheritance to organizations supporting victims of sex trafficking. "I want nothing to do with either family's money," he said in a statement. "I want to build my own life based on truth, not lies." The Trump organization collapsed within months. Without Donald's leadership and facing lawsuits from investors who claimed they had been defrauded, the company filed for bankruptcy. Trump Tower was sold to pay creditors. The golf courses were liquidated. The Trump name was removed from buildings around the world. In less than a year, the Trump empire that had taken decades to build was completely destroyed. And it all began with Jasmine Crockett's courage to reveal a secret that powerful people had killed to protect. Today, Jasmine is considered one of the most important political figures of her generation. Her willingness to expose the truth, regardless of the consequences, inspired a new generation of politicians committed to transparency and accountability. The case became a landmark in American jurisprudence. It established new precedents for prosecuting powerful people who think they're above the law. It showed that no secret is so well protected that it can't eventually be exposed. But most importantly, it proved that truth always finds a way to surface, no matter how deep it's buried or how many people die to protect it. 2 minutes ago, Jasmine Crockett exposed the biggest lie in American political history. 2 minutes ago, she proved that DNA doesn't lie, even when everything else does. 2 minutes ago, she showed the world that justice can prevail, even against the most powerful criminals. And the beautiful part? She was just getting started. Because real heroes don't just expose one lie. They dedicate their lives to making sure that truth always wins over deception, that justice always defeats corruption, and that no one, no matter how powerful, is above the law. If this story shocked you, share it with everyone who needs to know that secrets don't stay buried forever. If you believe DNA evidence should determine inheritance rights, like this video and spread the truth. Subscribe if you want more stories of courage defeating corruption at the highest levels. And remember, in a world where powerful people think they can hide their crimes behind lies and murder, sometimes all it takes is one person with evidence and the courage to use it. That's what happened 2 minutes ago. That's what Jasmine Crockett proved. And that's why her voice will echo through history as the sound of truth finally defeating the biggest lie ever told. Because DNA doesn't lie. Documents don't lie. Video evidence doesn't lie. The only liars are the people who think they can build empires on deception and get away with it forever. Today, they learned that forever has an expiration date. And that date was 2 minutes ago.